Hi, I'm Bill Hitchcock, and it is April 10th, 2020 when I'm recording this particular video clip. What I've got here is a set of student comments, and I just want to kind of give you an idea about what the data looks like and some things that we're going to be doing. You can download this from the eLearn site, and that should work for you. Otherwise, like I say, this is one of those examples where it's a real common type of application. You have a survey that you might be asking customers, you might be asking employees, you might be asking, in this case, students, what'd you think of a course, what'd you think of our products, what'd you think of, the program, whatever it might be. And we've got all this survey information that's just kind of dumped into a spreadsheet. And we're going to try to figure out how we can make heads or tails from this information. So here's my file. And what I'm going to do is first I want to turn, let's turn the freeze panes off. So I'm going to click on View, Freeze Panes, and then unfreeze the panes. So I can go all the way back up to cell A1. And you know from past video clips that I like to kind of shrink all the font size down so I can see things a little bit better. So I'm going to hit Shift and my down arrow, and I find out it looks like there's 220 records, and I'm just going to cursor down a little farther, and then I'm still holding my Shift key, cursoring way over to the right, and that's plenty. Let's go to Home. Let's change the font size here to font size 8, and then I hit Control Home. So that's kind of first step. Second thing that I want to do is I want to adjust my field names. So I'm using wrap text on all of those. So it looks like they're bold-faced, but I'll bold-face them again, turn it on, turn it off. I'm going to center these, and I'm going to choose wrap text. So that way I can narrow up my columns even just a bit more. Hit Control Home. Let's click on column A. I'm going to hold my Shift key, hit the End key once, E-N-D once, and then go over to the right. It looks like I've got all of my columns highlighted. A couple of these are pretty wide because we've got some comments in them. I'm just going to double click between two of these columns and see if we can adjust some of those columns a little bit more narrow. So for instance, my record number looks a little bit easier to read. I've got the session, the course code, and actually what I'm going to try to do with the course code is let's see if we can narrow this up even more. And then double click there, and sure enough I can get that. It was wide because my field name was wide. I'll try the same thing for this cross list code, see if there's anything going on there. We've got the CRN, that looks all right. Program code, I didn't mean to go quite that far. Let's try that. Delivery region, we can narrow that up. And I'm just moving all of these back just to see if we can clean this stuff up a little bit. Let's move this one back here. And once I've done that one on column I, you'll notice I'm going to have to adjust my row height. So I'm going to increase the row height there. And now I can shrink this back, and let's take our row height back down. So it looks like I can get some of those fields with kind of on 3 levels, if you will. So other things that I might want to do is some of these field names, it looks like there's underscores in there, so I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm going to click up there, put a space in between there. And the reason why I do it is that way, again, we can narrow up some of these column widths. And that way all the rest of us, I can read more information and see this. So let's see, we've got the course NPS group. So let's get rid of the underscores. I'm backspacing them out, just hit space. And let's see if we can narrow that one up a bit. That one apparently, course promoter is fairly wide, so nothing to do there. All right, this one is really a wide column. So let me see if I can move a few things around here. Come on. All right, well, try it this way. I'm going to right click, there it finally moved. Scroll over here just a little bit more. All right, if you ever get a column that's extremely wide and it kind of takes up the whole spreadsheet, what you can do is you can just right click right on the column letter and then choose column width and pick a number that's not quite as wide. So instead of 119.29, I'm going to try 75 and hit OK. And that narrowed that one up. And actually, now that I've got it there, I might even just take this. What I'm going to do is I want to adjust both these columns here, column L and column M, because they're both comment type columns. So I'm going to hold my shift key, select both of them, and let's get these both the same width. And I'll just narrow this up here, maybe to about that wide. And we'll see how that looks. All right, now that I've got that done, I want to readjust all my row heights. So I'm going to click on row number 1, hold my shift key, hit my end key once, down arrow, selects all the records, and then let's double click between any of these rows, and that shifts everything up a little bit. So if I hit Control Home, I've got a much more readable spreadsheet, and actually I can just about read everything online here. It's not looking too bad. All right, let's come down here. Let's put in View and Freeze Panes, and we'll freeze panes. So that way, as we scroll down, I can still read my field headings. So I'll hit Control Home there. And that looks pretty good. So let me take my file, now that I've cleaned that up just a little bit, kind of reformatting things. Let's save it. And start our next task. And the second task, what I would suggest doing is just go through and sort every single column and see what happens, see what information is, and take a look at some of these things. So for example, I've got the record number, and I believe that this data is sorted by record number. And if I hit Home and choose Sort and Filter, or Data and Sort and Filter would have worked, it's the same thing. I'm going to sort this largest to smallest, and if I hit End and Down, sure enough, there's my 220 records. So if we ever need to get it back in the original record order, there it is. Let's see if we can even narrow this column up. I don't know if it'll let me do it on the record number. And I guess it needs to be that wide. All right, next I got the section or session number. I'm just going to kind of glance, or first I'll sort. So this time, rather than doing the Home tab and sort, I'll show you that it also works under Data. So here's Data, and I want to sort in alphabetical order or in ascending order. So it looks like I've got a session where it's got the year and some number after it. All right, so 2011 and then 60. And let's just start using our arrow key and scrolling down through these. I'm not saying anything that really varies from that format. I'll hit End and Down, and sure enough, it looks as though this is data from 2011 through 2016. So that data looks fine. Let's try the course code. We'll sort by that. And I've got BIS 155. And let's scroll down a ways, and you can hit Page Down just to kind of glance through here. It looks like I'm still BIS 155. I don't know, maybe it's all the same course. Oh, wait, there's something different. BIS 325. And we can we went a little bit too far. It looks like there's two courses here. So, Control Home, I'm back to the top. For the cross list code, let's see. If I page down, it looks like that's all blank. In fact, if I hit End and Down arrow, I find out I've got, for some reason, kind of a blank column. So you've got two choices. First is, there might be some reason for having this in here. This was pulled from a bigger database, and it's just a subset of data. So therefore, maybe if we have that bigger database, we're going to want to keep things consistent. So if that's true, then what I would be tempted to do is, for our data, we don't need to see it. So I'm going to right-click here, And rather than deleting the column, I just want to hide it. And by hiding the column, it makes it a little bit easier to read some of the rest of this stuff out here, and we don't have a problem looking at some of that information. If this was really wide, all right, say I widen out my columns or my comments even wider, what we might end up doing is let's look at some identifiable information. For example, I've got the record number, the session, the course. That's kind of the essence of this data, or the identifiable information. Figure out whatever this course number happens to be, and let's go to View. And choose Freeze Panes, and we'll unfreeze them first. And then I'm going to go back to View and Freeze Panes now. So that way when I do it, as I scroll over to the right, I can still tell which course it happens to be and what record number it happens to be. So, all right, next we've got the CRN. Looks again like maybe a section code or something like that. I'm guessing it's an online one, BIS 155, on you, whatever that means. And we could talk to our users and find out what it does mean. So again, I want to sort this. I'm back to the Home tab. Choose Sort and Filter. Let's sort this A to Z and see if we have any different codes here. Now here it looks like I've got a bunch of numbers for the CRN. But as I tab down, there's all my numbers, there's all my numbers, all numbers. Here suddenly I've got this text that's there. So a couple of things. From an analyst standpoint, if you don't really know exactly what the data is, and you have some user that you're working on this might be a question. How come we had numbers for all the rest of these, and now suddenly we've got a text-based code showing up? And maybe they can explain it and tell us exactly what it is. But again, it's, don't delete any of the stuff, don't change it, leave it there, but ask the question, how come that coding changed to some extent? All right, let's try for the program code. Let's sort through there. See if we see any anomalies or anything that seems a little bit strange. Again, it looks like it's maybe some sort of a department code, and then either the country code, or there's something else kind of tied with it. And if I hit end and down, it looks like those codes are all working about the same. So we've got that. For the delivery region, metro, and the delivery location description, as I scroll, all right, first, just to make things easier, let's sort first. And let's just page down really quickly. It looks like it's just the word online all the time. I don't see any differences in any of that data. And let's go all the way down to the bottom. Sure enough, it still looks like it's all online. So again, how important is it to have all three of those showing up like that? I don't think it's really that important. It's the same kind of data over and over. So don't delete. Just select those two columns. Let's hide them in case somebody needs that information. We don't want to lose it. All right, next we've got the course NPS score. So this time let's take this and let's sort our data. And we can sort from smallest to largest. So there I've got some zeros. We've quickly go into 3s, 4s, we're all the way up to 7s. Let's page down. I've got a bunch of 7s, some 9s, bunch of 10s, a lot of 10s, and that's the highest number. So again, maybe what you could do is you could insert some rows up at the top, put in minimum, maximum to find out with numeric data, looking at something like that, and find out that information. let's try sorting the same way here. We've got our group. And with these, this course NPS group, here it looks like somebody's already done some encoding for us. So they went through, looked at some of these comments and tried to come up with some sort of a scoring system, some sort of a description. So for instance, here somebody wrote in a comment and said, I felt I needed more help in more advanced assignments. So they're said, well, all right, it's not a bad comment. And maybe the student marked it as a 5, but whoever did this encoding, they kind of said, hey, that sounds like kind of a detractor. It's kind of a bit of a negative comment here. As I scroll down a little bit farther, here's some that are passive, supposedly. I guess it's they did all right. I learned by applying and doing. The labs did for me the project or the final, which are the largest points. But then here we have something that says it's a course passive. Professor has taught this course very well. That doesn't seem all that passive, but maybe again, it was the score that the student put in there, a 7 out of 10, and that's ranked as passive. So let's go all the way to the bottom, take a look, and then finally we've got course promoters. Those are all those people, I'm guessing, that scored things as a 10. And we could check, just find out if those two do indeed match up. A VLOOKUP might be a way to do it. Or, again, just by, here's 220 records. It's a lot to go through, but it's not the end of the case. The comments, to sort it by that doesn't really help us a whole lot, other than, for instance, we might want to just try sorting this by comment. Sure, why not? And see what happens. It looks as though, for here, if I go all the way down to the bottom, there were some students that didn't put any comments, but really not all that many. Out of 220, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or so. If I take a look at suggestions to strengthen the course, let's try sorting by that. So there's A to Z. And let's go down to the bottom. There are not quite as many suggestions to fix up the course. So everybody's got a comment about the course, but they can't tell you how to fix it. So, and that in itself is useful information and something that you might want to analyze. And I would think something that you'd probably want to summarize in your report that says, hey, we looked at all these comments. This is what we found. So. All right, third step that I would do is consider separating out some of this data to help you if we put things in pivot tables, for example, or do some other summarization. For example, if I take a look at, let's just sort this stuff back in original record order here. If I look at the session number, it looks like it's a year and a course number. So what I want to do is I want to separate those two things out. So I'm going to grab the session, hit Shift, End and Down to select all that data, copy it, and I'm going to put this at the end of my spreadsheet here and paste it there. Then what I want to do is I want to take, I've still got all that data highlighted, and if you don't have it highlighted anymore, Shift End Down. You'll select it all, then go to Data, and we're going to split this apart. So I'm going to choose Text to Columns. And in this case, I don't want to use delimited because I don't have a specific character that's going to separate these, but I do want to do it by fixed width. So we'll choose fixed width, hit Next. I want to put a line right here between, I've got the year there and that section number. So if I do it after the fourth character, and let's hit Next. Actually, what I could do, that's all I really need to do. Next is going to ask me, do you want to format this? And I don't need to format it. I'm just going to hit Finish. And when I've done that, it's broke up my field name into sesh and ion, which is meaningless. The first part is the year, and the second part is going to be the, I don't know, we'll call it the section number. And let's narrow up those columns. So I've got the year there. And we've got the section columns. And let's sort by this. All right, so if we take this and choose sort, and this time, notice rather than just do an A to Z, which sorts by one field or one column, I want to do it both by, let's scroll through here. I want to do it by the year first, and then I'm going to add a level and sort it by my section number that I just created. And probably I should actually add a third reference point, because I'm going to be grouping this by year and then within the section number. Maybe it's by course, maybe it's by something else, but I'm just kind of getting a feel for the data at this point. So let's hit OK. And it looks as though our first year was 2011. Here's course or section number 60. And we've got a fair number of comments from that one. And then we jump into 2012. Let's hit end and down. And sure enough, there's our 2016. And we can find out that. So there might be something to be said about, you know, hey, does this data change at all over the years? And we can see it with that. All right, so that's the section, or yeah, the session. Next is the course code. So with the course code, I might want to take a look and separate this out in terms of, it looks like it's a division number, BIS, and a course number. So we'll do the same kind of thing. We'll click on course code, shift and down, copy that, hit end and right to get to the end of my data, paste it there. Let's go to data, choose text to columns. I want to do fixed width. Let me get there. And I want to separate this right between the department and that course number. Oh, come on. No, wait, I got to do that on the next page. Sorry. Next screen. Here it is. And right there. We'll hit finish. I've got my department, and we'll got the course number. I'm just abbreviating that somewhat. Select both these columns. Narrow up the column widths. And that way we can use this again in a pivot table to do some summarization. All right, last one. We've got the program code. And with the program code, this one's a little bit different because they don't, it's not all the same number of characters that we've got here, or at least I don't think it is. So I'm going to hit shift and down, copy this, end and right, paste it here. And for this one, let's go to text to columns. And this time let's try delimited rather than fixed width. So I'll hit this. And my delimiter is going to be, you can see there's a whole bunch of different options here. I'm going to choose other. And for the other character, it's an underscore. So shift and an underscore, and that'll separate out what looks as though some sort of a major declaration or something like that, and then finally the location. And hit next, and hit finish, and why don't we just call this the, we'll call it the program, P-R-O-G, prog, and this one let's call it the loc for location. Narrow up these columns. And we've got that. So that's our third major task that we want to do here. All right, something else that we can do is that we can do some computations, and we can convert some of this text somehow. One thing I want to look at is I want to find out how much did people type about some of these comments. You know, often you'll find with comments, if somebody writes a lot, it means they've got strong feelings. They're either, you know, very negative or they're very positive. So, you know, rather than having to read through those and somehow encode them some way, we might just take a look and see if there is something to be said about, you know, how passionate maybe somebody is about something. And, you know, they're going to tend to write more. Not always true, but, you know, I mean, that would be something to kind of dig into. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, let's see. Let's find out what the length is, our comment length. And I'm going to narrow up this column. That's pretty wide here. Oops, that didn't work all that well. Sorry about that. There we go. I've got the comment length. So I could do this manually. My first comment is, I really enjoyed the course, and I could just sit there and count. I is 1, space is 2, R is 3, E is 4, and so on. But there's a function in Excel that will let you get the length of something, and it's the len function. So you say the length of this text, and it tells me it's 89 characters. I'm going to copy that over. I've got the strength length, or this is how we want to strengthen the course, if you will, or improve the course, I guess you could call it. So let me see if I can narrow up this column a bit. Just a little bit more. There we go. We can narrow that one up too. So now that I've got those two, let's copy these formulas down. And we can do all sorts of things as far as, you know, hey, let's count these up and find out how many are zeros. In other words, you know, here's a 0 for the strength because they didn't have any suggestions about improving the course or strengthening the course. Let's try just doing a quick sort. And in fact, let's do Z to A. So that way it shows up as what's the longest comment. And here somebody wrote in 816 comments, and it says, this class is the worst. And the professor is not very understandable. You know, so that one I would say is a pretty, they've got strong feelings there, right? It's a bad course. You know, here's the second one that's fairly long. It's a 7, you know, so that's not overly strong. Here's one that's fairly long, a 9. Here's another 0. You know, so, you know, it's a little bit of a mix. You know, there's a couple of 5s in here that people wrote a fair amount. You know, so you've got that to take a look at. And then we could also take a look at the strength length, and, you know, let's try doing Z to A on that one. And somebody wrote in 603 characters, and we can check there again to find out. You know, here's a promoter. You know, somebody that liked the course apparently, but yet they still have a lot to say about how you could improve it. And, you know, you could check some of those things and do some analysis there. All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's hit Control Home. I've done a lot. This is a half an hour. We're going into a half an hour. Let's save this. And finally, let's wrap up with doing a couple of quick pivot tables just to give you some ideas about things that we can do. So I'm going to click on Insert and make a pivot table and hit OK. And the first thing I want to do is for, I don't know if it's this instructor, for these courses that we have, let's get that NPS score and take a look at that. So let's see, here's the course NPS score. That's the rating that at the end of the day, the student, hey, pick a number 0 to 10. Did you hate the course? Did you like the course or love the course? 0, you didn't like it. 10, you thought it was great. And I've got a sum of the course score of 1929, which doesn't mean anything. So I'm going to come down here and change the values on that. Let's try this again. Set the value field settings to an average. Change my title on it because that's kind of wide. We don't need that much. And let's just call it the average NPS score. Hit OK. And I've got an 8.768, which I'm assuming that's probably a pretty decent score considering 220 students, and it's pretty close to a 9. 8.77 out of 10. What is that? B plus? So maybe one way of thinking of that. So that's interesting to know. Second thing that I might want to take a look at is, let's break this down. Let's see, we added in the course number. So let's try the course number. And it gives me the sum of the course number. That's not so good. So let's get rid of course number. And I could have changed that and just moved the location of it. Let's just try up here. Here's the course code. We'll choose that. And there, it turns out we've just got 2 courses here, BIS 155 and BIS 325. So we've got 2 different courses, and it looks like there's a fair amount of consistency between the scores. So again, if this is one teacher, that's a good thing. Or at least between our scores, that looks pretty good. Then maybe let's take a look at this. And let's try popping year onto our pivot table. And it's given me the sum of the year, which I don't want the sum of the year. So I'm going to click and drag that up to the columns. And that way we've got our columns going across. So in BIS 155, there's our scores. And it looks like for the most part, started out a little bit less, a lower 81 or something like that. Then they kind of quickly jumped up there. They're pretty close to 9s. Same thing here on the BIS 325. We've got a 7.8, not a bad score, but then by the end of it, in 2016, the average was a 10. So those are both, I would say, probably pretty good signs. So, we like that story. Let's go to Analyze. Let's add in a pivot chart. And we've got this chart here. All right, yeah, sure, that looks wonderful, I guess. Clustered column. Sorry, my cursor's kind of blinking around here. I just got to be able to get navigating on this and being able to hit OK. All right, so this chart isn't all that helpful. It's not too bad, but it's using the years with these colors. So what I might be tempted to do is let's just flip-flop the axis and the legend. So let's take the course code and drag that up here, and let's put the year down below, and we end up with a chart that looks something like this. And we've got our 2 different colors for the courses. Like I said, we've got the BIS 155. Seems fairly consistent. Those are the blue bars. The BIS 325, there you can see kind of a steady increase going from 2013 to 2016. I would say that this is a pretty successful chart and helping us to show some information there. So let's rename this sheet. And we'll just call it course averages. And if you want to say pivot or something like that, so you remember that it's a pivot table. So there's story number one. Let's go back to our student comments and look at this, and we'll hit Control Home. And what I want to do next is, let's maybe try a histogram and see what we can come up with that. So I think what we can do is let's insert another pivot table. And we'll grab all this information, same steps as what we ran through on the last one. I'm going to focus again on the NPS score. So whatever your kind of numeric metric is that you want to use. I'm going to change this again to the average. So I'm just right-clicking on sum, of course. I want to choose the value field settings. We want to change this to average. Shorten up my field name up at the top here. And let's format that number so it's a little bit nicer to read. So I've got the average score there. All right, that's kind of interesting. But the only thing is, what I want to do is I want to count out how many people answered 0, how many did 1, how many did 2, how many did 3, and so on. So in that case, what I need to do with this score is I don't want it there. I want to put this in the rows, for example. All right, so there's my scores. Anywhere from, didn't look like anybody ever picked a 1. All right, so we've got 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, nobody ever ranked us a 1. So let's put in for my other field the record number. And I don't want the sum of the record numbers. I want the count. So I'm going to change this value field settings to the count. And then I can change my field name up here. And let's just call this the rec count or rec CNT or something short and sweet. Let's format that. We don't need the 2 decimals. All right, so I'll remove those decimals. And it looks like out of the 220 respondents, 3 people put in a 3, or a 0, I'm sorry. Another 3 ranked it as a 2, here. I mean, for the most part, it looks like most of our scores are all fairly high. In fact, over that's over half were 10s, right? So, I mean, that's a pretty powerful story just in itself. You can add in a pivot chart for this one. And I'm going to hit OK. Get rid of this legend. That's kind of redundant. And this is, change our title. And just say it's the number of students scoring these values. I don't know. Something like that. All right, so we know what it is. Let's go to our pivot chart tools. We'll choose Analyze. And, sorry about that. I want to go to Design. And I want to add a chart element. I'll put in an axis title. For the horizontal, that's my NPS score. Or maybe NPS score chosen would be a good title for that one. And for the vertical, we'll say number of students. And it looks like, oops, I somehow lost my, let me see if I can undo this There we go. I've got that back. Lost my scale. So let me try this one more time. Access titles. Let's try the primary vertical. There we go. And we've got number of students. And we've got that information there. So one other thing that you might consider doing with this particular chart, as I move that around, you could come under the row labels, click in that column, and sort this. So I'm going to come up to sort and filter and choose this largest to smallest. So that way it's kind of, if you want to emphasize the fact that, look at how many people scored, this is 10, and then actually 9 and 8 were the next bunch, and there's really very few people that ranked anything below a 5. And that is somewhat useful. Another thing that you can do is, for the pivot table, we can, let's see, value field settings. And I can show these values. And is it going to let me do it here? It's not. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can get to this someplace else. But there's a way in a pivot table that you can show this as a percent. So I'm going to try here. Let's see, show values as. I think that's where I can do it. Again, it looks like it's grayed out. Oh, I see why. It says show no calculation. There it is. I want to show it as the percent of grand total. And hit OK. And there you can, that probably is even better because, 55%, almost 54% have ranked this a 10 or better. We can add these three numbers up and find out what percent, 82, 83% said 8 or better for the score on something like this. So kind of the 80-20 rule sort of thing. All right, finally, last thing that I want to do with this, and again, rename the sheet, you can change that, is if we go back to the student comments, hit Control Home, at some point you're going to want to read through all those comments. But before you just start reading through them, remember some of these are for certain courses and it affects different times and so on. So you're probably going to want to sort your data before you do that. So I would go up to Data, choose Sort, and the first thing that I want to sort by is not so much the length of my comments. I want to sort by the, come on, let me get up to the top here. I want to sort by the course code first. And then within the course code, I'm going to want to sort this by probably the session. So that way I've got the year and what session that happened to be. And then finally you can decide, do you want to get the good news first or the bad news first? I would say let's do our NPS scores and let's read this largest to smallest and hit OK. And here we start out. This was the BIS 325 course, and back in, 2013 or something like that. My professor is awesome. There's a number 10. Here's a 9. They start going down, but then we get to another 10, which is the next section. So, right there you can kind of see, hey, you've got these different courses. And something else that you might do too is use some conditional formatting to change the session number so that way it's a little bit more identifiable about what course is what. So I'm just going to highlight all my courses here and just try doing home, conditional formatting, and use a color scale. And not that these are good, bad, or indifferent, but we'll just choose some color scale. Oh, you know what would have helped? If I would have highlighted all the cells and then done it. So let me try that one more time. Let's try a color scale here. And here we go. We'll try a, if I can get there. I'm having troubles with my mouse. There we go. We got a red, white, and blue one. So if we come up to the top, there we go. I guess it's going blue, and then it's changing red. So you can kind of, you know, see some of those numbers a little bit better, and break this out. So here we've got a third course, or a third section, 2014. We've got some 10s. There's the comments. We can read through them and see how that goes. So I realize a fair amount of time to get through all this information, but it's a really good way of processing some survey data. I hope that this helps out. Hit Control Home, save your work, and all you have to do is turn that in. So good luck getting this assignment done.